Good morning. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. It is Thursday, May 7th, and this is our COVID conversation, 11 o'clock Facebook Live discussion that we have during the period of our coronavirus outbreak. Here in Westchester County, we have tried to deal with some of the practical issues of administering government, dealing with the pandemic directly, the testing that we have to do, the hospitalization issues, and we've interviewed a lot of folks within the county government and outside the county government to help give us some perspective on those different elements of the issue. Today, however, is designated nationwide as a National Day of Prayer, and we thought of no person better to discuss the issue of prayer and faith at a time where we need both secular leadership and spiritual faith than Father Joseph McShane, who is the president of Fordham University. And I'm proud to say my alma mater, Rose Hill class of 74. It's also the alma mater of Catherine Chaffee. She doesn't have to add the year that she graduated from there, but it was a lot later than I was. So Father McShane, thank you for coming and sharing your time and your insights with us today.
George, thank you for the invitation. It's always an honor to be with you. We're very proud of you and everything you've done for the county. And as I said off camera a few moments ago, I'm particularly proud of the compassionate leadership that you've shown to the people of the county in the course of this terrible, terrible moment in the history of the county. So thank you, and be assured that Fordham is proud and Fordham prays for you.
Thank you very much. We have had a great connection in this office that I rent for a short period of time as county executive. My four immediate predecessors, Rob Astorino, Andy Spano, Andy O'Rourke, and Aldo Bello, all had a Fordham connection, Fordham Law, Fordham undergraduate. So that Rose Hill campus has a great connection to this office here in White Plains. And I'm also proud of my daughter, who holds a master in social work from Fordham, and she did that at the Westchester campus. So that's a good Fordham connection. So it's fascinating to me, Father, that obviously you're a spiritual leader, and yet you're also the leader of an educational institution. So you have a secular responsibility in this age to deal with the young men and women and the professors and all of the administrative staff at Fordham. And at the same time, you're looked to as a source of faith. As a Jesuit, and we're very proud that our Pope is a Jesuit, you understand this both secular and spiritual combination. How do you personally, and then how do you advise the rest of us to lean on faith of any kind? For those who may not be Catholic or Christian, whatever faith they have, how do we lean on faith, Father, in a moment like this?
George, that's a great question, one that I wrestle with a lot. You mentioned Pope Francis. Pope Francis has said that, in the midst of this terrible moment in the history of the human family, all of us have been called to dig deeper and to look at what is essential in life. And he has led us, I think, very effectively in that search for, finding out what is most essential in human life. And, from my point of view, or in my position, I should say, I was struck by a note that I got from one of our alumni, right as we got deep into Lent. And he wrote and said wistfully, "I never thought my Lenten fast would be a fast from the Eucharist. And I really want to be reconnected in a significant way with the faith. And I'm doing it, in a hunkered down mode." So that spoke volumes to me about the great hunger and the thirst that people have, whether they're Christian or not Christian. And of course, this event that the world is going through, happened when Christians throughout the world were celebrating first Lent and then the Easter season, and when our Jewish sisters and brothers went through Passover. And now our Muslim brothers and sisters are in Ramadan. So it was this strange coming together of moments that normally call for reflection anyhow. But in this, I think people of any faith, and people even of no faith, have found the need to dig deeper, to ask important questions about themselves, the meaning of their lives, not the meaning of life in general, but the meaning of their lives. I think it's been an honor and a grace to be able to walk with them as they've done it. The other thing I'd say, George, is during this period, what we've discovered, not in ourselves, but by looking, out, the heroic figures that have emerged in our midst, they tell us by their actions, not by their words, but by their actions, what is important and what makes for a noble and holy life. And I'm talking, of course, about the first responders,
Yes.
The doctors, the nurses, the EMT staffs, the men and women who clean the hospitals, who keep them going, the men and women who take care of their neighbors. I think that people, as they have dug deep, have found these spiritual calls to greater service and selflessness. So that's the grace of the moment. It's a moment we wouldn't have asked for, but it came. And I think that what is remarkable about the people of our city, our state, our county, and our nation is that they have found within themselves these great values, and they're committed to them more than ever.
We put great weight as a culture, and all the cultures of the world with different ways to express it. We put great weight on certain symbolic things that we celebrate or that we recognize. We're on the cusp of Mother's Day in the next couple of days. When this pandemic first hit, it happened right in great force. We started shutting down businesses right around the time of St. Patrick's Day, which you and I both having Irish heritage. I have a little Italian heritage too, so I'm proud of both of them. But nonetheless, we lost St. Patrick's Day as a celebratory period. We've lost Little League opening day baseball in April. It's a celebratory part of our lives. We've lost Cinco de Mayo, which means a lot to our Mexican and many times all of our Latino friends. And we're on the cusp of a Memorial Day that may be nothing like any Memorial Day that we've had. And I think in terms of the loss of services, religious services, that my Muslim brothers can't go into the mosque as they normally would. My Jewish friends can't go into the synagogue as they normally would. And we are experiencing what it is like not to have a Palm Sunday Mass or an Easter Mass. How is it that you function without those specific services that we seem to pivot around? Obviously, as Roman Catholics, we believe that it's more than just a symbolic thing. It's actually the consubstantiation of the Eucharist is actually the body of Christ. But forgetting for that moment that we're generalized as to all religions, we don't have these services to pivot our lives around. How do we handle that as part of our maintenance of faith?
Excellent question again, George. One of the things that has happened is that the human mind, which is one of God's great gifts to all of us, has found ways to build bridges, to create networks that connect people to precisely those moments. For instance, I don't know if you had a chance to watch when Pope Francis walked through the rain all alone through St. Peter's Square and led all of us, Catholics, non-Catholics, believers, non-believers, in a moment of reflection on what it was that was going on in the world. Then you also have synagogues, temples, mosques, churches using technology to connect and to create community in a moment of great solitude. And that, I think, has created, I think, outlets for the longing that we feel for the connectedness to God and our neighbor at the same time. I think, ironically enough, George, one of the things that we have learned at this time, and I'm going to say this to our graduates in the virtual graduation ceremony that we're going to have, a virtual graduation, George, can you imagine? I'm going to say that during this period of time, oddly enough, while we've been hunkered down, we've discovered that life is not a solo act, but rather that we are social beings and we are also beings who are connected to God. And as a result, we have found, I think, new liturgies, new ways of doing things. One of the things that I did, and we were talking, Catherine and I, before you came in, one of the things that I began to do as soon as we closed, Fordham never closed, none of the universities ever closed. And I say that, I want to point out that the SUNY schools up in Westchester and all the private schools, we never closed, we just went into a new mode. But when we went new mode, I began the practice of writing to the Fordham community worldwide every Sunday morning so that I could stay connected. And also because of something that you mentioned before, George, I have two jobs in one lifetime. I'm the president of the university, but also the pastor of the university. And I, having listened to people and having examined my own heart and soul, I came to the realization that one thing I could do as a ministry would be to reach out every Sunday morning and provide people with a bit of a homily, sometimes a little cheekily written, I must say, but on purpose. Uh, but other times quite serious. This coming Sunday, I have one that I think I'm going to get a lot of, what are you crazy comments about. But it was a way for me to connect, to sympathize, to be present. And George, this is something that I admire in you, and I really do. You understand the ministry of just being present to people. And as you're present to people, you respond. And you respond frequently in great and well-crafted words. But more, George, let's be honest, because you can dip into both or tap into both your Irish and far more, I would say, illustrious Italian side. You know that love is shown in, not in words, but in the deed. And the deeds that you have been about have been responsive, respectful, and loving. And I don't know how many politicians we can say that about. I think we are blessed with a number of great politicians, and we have through our history. But George, you're doing that. You're doing it very well. Bad way or long way of saying, I think, George, public figures, whether it's a president of a university or a county executive, are called to be in many ways at this moment ministerial and pastoral. And pastoral right now is walking with people, listening intently, and just being present.
Well, Father, that is the path that both you and I and so many other people have, that we have to be multiple things at the same time. Being at Lenoir Preserve yesterday and speaking about what the ribbons meant, and I think the phrase I used is that each of these ribbons represents somebody who once lived recently and was loved, and now they're gone. And we have to have some way as humans to connect to that person. At the very same time, in the meeting that I had just before we began this interview, I was sitting with our financial people, and we were talking about the financial freedom the county government is in, and we talked about the different strategies of how we would try to close that gap and what the variables were. And it was a conversation that drew from my experiences in business and what have you. And it's balancing both of those two things at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It's trying to be the person that you are, all of us, not me alone, not you alone, but then also, dealing with something that's really greater than us. And I do think in a position of secular authority, you're humbled when you realize that this virus has an ability to outpace that which our human skills can deal with.
Mm-hmm.
We're very proud of our great economy. And within 30 days, it collapsed in front of our eyes. We have a terrific military in this United States of America. We fear no country on earth. And yet our missiles and our men were of no help to us in fighting this contagion. And I do think, because we're still groping with it now, we're trying to figure out, what do we open, what do we close? How can we be sure if we do this, it won't spread the contagion? There's so much unknowable about this, even with the finest scientific minds at fingertip, that we realize how limited we are human beings, all of us, the collected humanity, and how much we need something greater than us to give us, a light that we can guide our boat by in this stormy weather. You have students in your care, and Catherine and I were once one of those students at various times in our lives. And I remember 50 years ago, this moment, I was finishing up high school, Mount Vernon High School. My good friend Tom DiGiulio, who's a good friend of yours as well, was already a freshman at Fordham University, and he sang Fordham's praises. So I applied and was accepted. And I couldn't wait until September of 1970 to become a freshman at Fordham University. So there are kids right there, right now, 50 years later, that are in the exact same position that I was 50 years ago, graduating high school, but they're going through these virtual graduations, a completely, indescribable, alternative to the traditional graduation. And they're getting ready to go to your university this fall. How do you lead a student body like this? How do you deal with the people who are in the campus, those who should have graduated college this year or will graduate college this year? And how do you deal with an incoming freshman class as the leader of a secular institution?
Right, George. We here at Fordham for the last 2 months now have been trying to stay in touch with the students. And, all instruction is now online, distance, absolutely. But what people don't realize is that the colleges and universities have stayed in very close touch with students through student affairs. So we continue to do career counseling. We continue to offer students, mental health services. We continue to encourage them to network among themselves and with us. We've had a lot of listening sessions, a lot of focus groups. And George, what we've learned from the focus groups of our present students, and I'm going to get into the seniors in a second, is that they really they crave the company of their fellow students. They crave the contact with faculty. They miss all of that. They also miss, let's be honest, the certain carefree moment in their lives, which is called college. Think back to what you enjoyed when you were at Rose Hill. Well behaved. I've checked your records. Very well behaved. There's nothing in there that you could ever be
I
called.
think we
out.
sanitized those records after the fact.
No. They're filled with praise. Transcript down. But we stay in touch with them. And for the seniors, this is an especially, and you put your finger right on it, this is an especially tough moment because they have been looking forward to this for 4 years. In point of fact, they've been looking forward to it for 22 years. Their day in the sun on Edwards Parade with everyone around them that they've known for 4 years, with their parents and grandparents and siblings all around them. And this was going to be their moment to shine. And it's not to happen at this moment. So what have we done? We're going to have a virtual baccalaureate mass. We'll have a virtual graduation. We're going to have virtual diploma ceremonies. Virtual only in the sense that they're not present. These are the real, by the way, these are the real graduations. Every college and university will tell you this, because on the 16th of May, in the virtual commencement, the degrees are granted, they're conferred, which means that the student goes out into the world, ready for a job, and anybody who's a prospective employer knows that they are certifiably graduates of Fordham. But we've made them the promise, and we're going to deliver on it, that once the healthcare authorities, led, I think, by the remarkably wise and straight-talking Dr. Fauci, when we get from them, by the way, a graduate of a Jesuit high school, just saying, George, and a Jesuit college, just saying, George.
We're proud of him too. We know some of his relatives here in Westchester.
See, I knew it. Everyone ultimately gets to the promised land of Westchester, but which is what I call it. And I have two brothers, who live up there.
Yes,
one of
indeed.
whom has a wife who's in the legislature, a wonderful, wonderful woman, Kitley Koval. I shouldn't mention her name, but there you are. I'm very proud of her. But as soon as we get the all clear, we're going to get in touch with them and say, this is the weekend where you're going to have your graduation as you intended it and as you hoped it would be. So for our present students, we're listening to them, we're walking with them, we're doing as much as we can to stay in touch with them. And I'm going to get back to something in a minute because you and I think, would agree on this. For the prospective students, George, imagine we had to sell the university without an open house. So we had virtual open houses. We had, we filmed campus tours for all three of our campuses, Westchester, Rose Hill, and Lincoln Center. We had student workers who gave up their time to be online while the tours were going on to answer any questions.
Right.
To tell the full story. And so we've done as much as we can, we believe, and we're learning every day what more we could do. And one of the things, and George, I'll say this, I couldn't be more proud of my faculty. I'm a little possessive here, but our faculty at Fordham, because they're really great, and our staff, they go the extra mile. And someone asked me, well, what's the secret to, what you do or what you try to do? And I look at you, George, and I think you'd agree. To be in this moment and to be asked to do, to occupy a position of leadership or supervision, whatever you want to call it, you have to know your people, you have to love them. And from your knowledge and your love, you do what is necessary, not for yourself. You don't do anything for yourself, George. I have my spies and they tell me that. You live to serve, and you serve effectively because you know your people. And you're not afraid, in a certain sense, to wear your Italian-Irish heart on your sleeve and show people that you care. So I think that that's what you and I are doing in this moment, which is a crazy moment. And Dr. Fauci said, and you've heard him say this, and I've quoted him frequently at meetings of other presidents and my staff here. We don't set the timeline. The virus sets the timeline, and this is a virus that has foxed us at every turn. So that's what we're doing, and I can't praise you and your staff enough for what you're doing up in Westchester. And people don't know how complex Westchester is. People have a say, oh, well, I know Westchester. You don't know Westchester until you try and serve it. You know that.
Well, Father, I guess a great way to close. This is National Day of Prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And we normally would have a major prayer breakfast here in White Plains, as they would have it nationally in different other locations. And we would have clergy members from the various different faiths say a word, read from the sacred scriptures, and give us a word that we can cling to. As we close out our conversation, tell me from your perspective, what does prayer mean to you? What does it mean to you in your life? And so that we can all hopefully be more prayerful in our lives.
George, for me, prayer is an act of love. And if you're lucky enough, God will teach you how to love through your prayer and how to pray through your love. And I say that because, for us as Christians, one of the last things that Jesus said to his disciples was, this is my commandment, love one another. And that's my prayer, that people, and I have to say that prayer, and this, George, that prayer has been realized in our midst, in the innumerable acts of kindness. You talked before about armies, and you talked about, the power of the United States. I think what right now our prayer has been answered in and through the innumerable heroic acts of our neighbors who have reached deep down into their hearts, and numbered their hearts have told them in their prayer, love one another. That's what we're sent to be about. That's what we're sent to do. And at this moment, I think that's the most important thing we can do. But love, not in word, but in deed. And that's why, and I'd be willing to bet, George, that like myself, you can't watch the evening news and see the nurses and the doctors and the EMTs and the people who wash the floors of the hospitals without choking up. Because it's a lesson for us all, a lesson in love. Love in action, love in real life. So that's what I would say.
I think you've said it as well as it can be said. And when we look at those nurses and those doctors and the respiratory therapists who are up close and personal with the disease and the people suffering it, I'll use the word that St. John the Baptist said, I'm not fit to untie their sandals. You can have any powerful title and compensation, but those people are doing it out of a pure act of love.
Right.
We've been speaking with Father Joseph McShane, who's the president of Fordham University, member of the Society of Jesus, and the spiritual leader as well as the administrative leader of Fordham University, one of the great institutions of America, and I'm proud to be a graduate of it. Father McShane, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for the great honor. And George, I'll be praying for you.
Thank you. We appreciate it greatly. We'll be back at 2 o'clock today. We'll be off-site at the Theodore Young Community Center, where with the assistance of Ken Jenkins, our Deputy County Executive, Alfreda Williams, County Legislator, some members of the Greenburgh Town Council, will be making sure that we give out masks and some other valuable things to the folks who live in that area, Fairview section of Greenburgh, our friends, African-American friends who have been more affected by this virus contagion than some of the other demographic groups. And we want to make that outreach today to be helpful to them. And we'll see you there for the update at 2 o'clock. George Latimer, thanks for watching. Stay safe. Talk to you in a couple of hours. Bye-bye.